Here are some of the books that I read in the month of June this year during Pride Month. and I think there's like 6 here. Yeah, so these are 6 of the 8 that I read this month, and 2 of them I got through Libby, and none are like the other. So these books kind of run the gamut. So from something like Babel, which is more like dark academia and language, and then we have Harriet Tubman, Live in Concert by Bob the Drag Queen, my favorite drag queen. Well, one of them at least. Then there's Piglet, which is really like chaos, wedding, and food and life choices. And we have Dark Days Ahead by Natalie Docherty, which is more of like tech, AI, magic, dystopian, the world's gonna end, and kind of seems like a very likely future or outcome. And then this one was more a book that I wanted to read. Spillover is a book that I wanted to read mainly just because of my line of work. I'm very into infectious diseases and their origins, and this was pretty damn good. A little boring in parts. And then Wild Dark Shore, so this was more like an eco-thriller and like a family story, but also, whoa, good book. So I didn't really know how to rank these books or to talk about them. I feel like last month it was a very cohesive, all of the books that I read had some variant of love in the the structure of the book and like the overarching theme, romantic or not. But I think this month was kind of all over the place. Although I did make it an intention to read books with queer characters, and I think I did a really good job of that. Almost all the books have a queer character in them, or some LGBTQ plus representation for the community. But I think I might rank them from the order of like my least favorite to my most favorite. And yeah, build the suspense and keep you on the hook for the best book of the bunch, in my humble opinion. So I'm not saying that these books were bad by any means. Like, I definitely think this month I didn't read a bad book. Like, I would recommend all of these. And I also think this month something shifted in my brain where I was like, do I really want to star rate books? Like, oh, is this a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 5 or whatever? I think I would rather spend the time recommending a book or not recommending a book. And honestly, if it's not worthy of recommendation, I probably won't share it. So if you know I'm sharing a book, you know that I, at least on some level, would recommend it to someone. Okay, so first up here, my least favorite book of the month, but it was still really good. This is Spillover by David Quammen. I hope I'm saying their last name correctly. So this book really is not for the faint of heart. So if you're a hypochondriac, or if you really are afraid of the next pandemic or zoonotic diseases, then this isn't the book for you. Do not read this book. But if you really want to get to know the history of some of the infectious diseases that we hear about today, like HIV or Ebola, things like that, and other like scarier viruses that I won't even tease, because unless you really want to read about the book, you probably don't want to know about them. But I would recommend this if you are into, science or learning more about zoonotic viruses or how things spill over from animals to humans, because that's typically how a lot of viruses, and especially pandemic level viruses, spread. So check it out. I initially read it on my Kindle. It was like a borrow from Libby, but I actually got the book in a thrift store this month. It was kind of kismet. So that's Spillover. Okay, so the next book is Cultish by Amanda Montell. I don't have the physical book because I got it on Libby as a freehold type of book. But anyways, I haven't read a book on my Kindle since that book, so it still shows up as my like lock screen. This is kind of what the book looks like. So it's Cultish, the language of fanaticism. And more or less, it kind of is a little teaser about some of the famous cults you might have heard about, like Nexium a little bit, and the Heaven's Gate. If you've ever heard the phrase, drink the Kool-Aid, that's actually not PC, spoiler alert, because there's some really dark-rooted history there that I don't want to spoil, but it's really good. And it also really kind of touches on the language of cults, but things that aren't cults that have like a cult following, or like I'll use an example, like a Soul Cycle type thing, how the language in which they use for their advertisements and like the community that they bring in, and even while you're in the classes, they kind of keep you pumped and like, you know, high off the supply kind of thing. And how they also talk about Scientology in here. There was a pretty good example. I personally know a little teeny bit about Scientology. Dated one once. That's a deep story there. But more or less, it's really like the language that they use, these organizations or religions or cults, or even like fandoms or that sort of thing. That's how they really keep people in, is through language and perception, and that becomes people's new realities, instead of just like, oh, we're a cult, come join us. And then it also really explores how all of us are low-key a little bit afraid of being wrapped into a cult on some level. Like, that's why we're fascinated with it in media and like documentaries and things like that. And we're like, what would inspire someone to join a cult like this? Like, how did they get roped up in this craziness? And this book does a great job of kind of explaining how just like the average person might be roped into it. So I thought it was pretty cool. It wasn't my favorite book of the month, but it was very interesting, and also I thought it did a great job of providing history, but like also personal insight from the author. Another book that I read this month, I don't really have it anymore, got returned on my Kindle from Libby, is Signs by Lynne Jackson. And I feel like this was kind of like the outlier of June. It was really a book about, spoiler alert, signs from the universe, and how like people that we've lost communicate with us, or how God or the creator or whoever you worship communicates with us, and how our spirit guides reach out to us. I'm a firm believer in signs. Someone once told me that if I see one singular butterfly pop into my line of vision, that it is my mom, my late mother, who passed away about like 12 years ago. It is her popping in to say hello, or kind of like a wink and a nod from her. And then if I see one and then one other butterfly trailing it, it is my mom and also my late grandfather who passed. So that's always reassuring. I'm definitely a believer in manifestation and abundance and speaking things into existence and being receptive to like energy and things like that. I know it sounds a little woo-woo sometimes, but you know, if it comforts you and you want to know a little bit more about other people's experience with science and their many different shapes and forms, this book is pretty good. And also, the author, Lynne Jackson, she's like a psychic medium and not one of those crooked ones, so I feel like she doesn't have anything to lose. I mean, she has a little bit of income to gain, but, you know, respect the hustle, but I don't think it's a hustle or a sham. I think she's the real deal. Okay, so the next one is Piglet by Lottie, Hazell. I don't know why I had to like stare so intently at the cover, because I just finished this book, so I obviously know the name and the author, but I also get mesmerized by this like hamburger on the front. And if you read the book, you might actually know where and what scene this particular hamburger might be a part of. Also, I apologize if you hear my dog licking. A dog's gonna do what a dog's gonna do. So what this book presents as is a lead up to a wedding for our main character Piglet, and it ends up being kind of like a commentary on eating and eating disorders and gluttony, but also secrets, which we, spoiler alert, you don't find out the secret of this book, or maybe you do. And then like just kind of the pressure we put to find our partner, build a life, and get married, and then happily ever after. But is it really happily ever after if it's planned, and does your life just end there? The book kind of answers some of those. I definitely had this on my shelf for a long time, and I'm glad I read it. I definitely wasn't my favorite book of this bunch, but it was really good. And if you're curious to read something from an author that really has the most amazing descriptions of food and like really deep thoughts when it comes to relationships and family and how we question our place in each of those things, this is the book for you. If not anything, for the cover, right? Alright, whoa, look at that. The next book is Dark Days Ahead by Natalie Docherty. So I actually have become like online friends with this author, which is pretty cool. She wrote this book, and it really centers on 3 female protagonists, Spencer, Narina, and Rose, who end up developing, spoiler alert, some type of powers, whether magical or not. And it's really rooted in tech and AI and kind of like a not so far off dystopian possibility of a America that might happen. There's these bad guys involved with the apparatus, and there's these like leaders called architects, and this book rocks. I mean, I was really impressed. I had another friend on Bookstagram that recommended it, and I'm glad the author sent this to me. Like, first of all, how generous, and also just really sweet, and I'm glad I got to read it, and it was so worth it because it was a book I probably wouldn't normally read, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're into, tech and strong female protagonists and magic and things like that, then you really like this. Alright, next up, Babel, or as I like to call it, Babel, by RF Kuang. And this book really is kind of dark academia meets language, and also kind of inspirational language learning. The world building is amazing. The kind of like historical fiction elements, but like obviously fake and fictional. That's not something I really go for, but everyone really recommends, well, everyone online actually recommends this book. I don't think I have a friend who actually read it in real life. But I'm glad I read it. I think if anything, the takeaway was that language is powerful, and not just the English language, which I'm speaking, but all languages that exist, and how powerful that like being receptive for learning language or understanding other people's language if you're going to, visit another country, that sort of thing. I really liked this book. Like, it was almost 100%. There was some, spoiler alert, a little queer baiting here, and I didn't like that part. That's probably why I knocked it down a peg or two. But I really liked it, and I would recommend it, and the hype is real. Like, it's really good. I read Yellowface by this author, and I liked that book. It was good, and it was my introduction to the author. But I definitely think this took so much research and time, and I'm actually very excited to read their upcoming book that's coming out later this year. So, Babel was good, or Babel was really good, and I recommend it. Alright, so the next book is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. I think I said that right. I wanted to say McConaughey like Matthew McConaughey, but I don't think that's right. Mainly because of where they're from. So, this book was fantastic. I've had quite a few people on the book tube bookstagram verse telling me to read this book. It's really an eco-thriller at its core, but it's also a book about a family, and a family that's lost their matriarch. It's also about a woman who, washes up on this wild, dark shore of, this remote research facility island place, and kind of like what her story is and why is she there. And if you're really nerdy, I think you'll enjoy it too, because it talks in a fictitious way, but it's kind of based on something real. It's that seed vault where, if there's ever like a apocalypse or whatever, whoever's left, I guess, can kind of still use the seeds from a lot of different species of plants and things like that. And that's kind of what this family does, is they, help preserve these things. And this book was really good. Like, I mean, if I wasn't being left in suspense, I was also like really struggling with, are these kids gonna stay alive throughout this whole book? And there is some LGBTQ representation in this book, which I loved. It's not as forward in the book, but it is very fulfilling, and also ties in some coming of age, like finding yourself when it comes to sexuality. It was kind of a pleasant surprise because I didn't really expect it. And yes, okay, just read this book. Read it. It's really good. And last but not least, Harriet Tubman live in concert by Bob the Drag Queen, one of my favorite drag queens. And I mean, lucky enough, he came to perform at a comedy club near where my grandmother lives. So I got to see Bob this month live in, well, not concert, but live in stand-up. So it was pretty cool, and I read the book. I was like, I have to read their book before I show up to this event, in the event that he talked about it. So I was really excited. Like, the concept is that Harriet Tubman, along with some other people, are brought to the future somehow. They magically appear. They don't really talk about how, or if they did, I missed it. Sorry, Bob. But the fact that Harriet Tubman came back and wanted to produce an album with the help of the other main character, Darnell. Like, what a concept. Like, I have to get the word out, and I have to produce this album and take it on the road and spread the word of what happened during slavery and how I can empower Black people and African Americans in this country. And it was awesome. And obviously this book was queer, and even reading it, like, Bob is such an amazing artist, to the point where, like, you can tell he poured his heart and soul into this book, and every word written, like, I read it in Bob's voice. I'm sure the audio is great because Bob narrates, but this was fantastic. It was definitely, like, it was a hard race between Wild Dark Shore and this one, but this was my favorite book that I read in June. And also, like, how poignant during Pride Month. Alright, so that's it. And these were the books that I read in June, and I hope you read at least one of them. They're all really good. And I hope to see you in the next month of my book stack series. Okay, well, wishing you well, and ciao.